Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Brass 101. It's great to have you here this evening. And I want to thank you for taking time out of your evening to learn a little bit more about snow safety. We have an outstanding program for you here this evening. I'm going to start the introduction shortly, but to give you an idea of our program tonight, we're going to continue with our Brass 101 program up until about the 50-minute mark. Then we'll go to a Q&A. Following that Q&A, we're honored tonight to have with us U.S. ski team star Nina O'Brien, fresh off a great finish in her comeback bid at Killington in the Giant Slalom World Cup last weekend. And we will wrap things up this evening with a showing of off-piste. To get things rolling tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce someone who I've been able to work with over the last few years to help spread the message of snow safety. Cindy Burlack was deeply impacted back on January 5th, 2015, when her son Ronnie, along with Bryce Astle, were killed in an avalanche in Solden, Austria. Since that time, it has been the mission of the families to educate people like you so that that accident doesn't happen in your family in the future. Cindy is not coming to us from the ski slopes tonight. She and her husband, Steve, are on a sailing venture in the Caribbean. So she is sitting dockside in Antigua, and I think it's about 80 degrees, and she can fill you in on that. Cindy Burlack, welcome, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, Tom. Thanks so much for that nice introduction. And I'm so pleased that all of you have come here to learn more to keep yourself safe. I'm not in the snow environment right now, but the avalanche danger is never far from my mind because I miss my son and I don't want anybody else to go through what we've gone through. We could not bring this program tonight to you without our dedicated sponsors, Utah Avalanche Center, Know Before You Go, Nordica, Sync, Backcountry Access, World Cup Supply, U.S. Ski and Snowboard, and Tom Kelly Communications. We wish our son Ronnie and Bryce of Snowbird, all Utah, had heard this message that you're hearing tonight. They were very enthusiastic skiers, and we're so proud of their accomplishments because they were so dedicated to their goals, and they were fine young men. But we know that it only takes a day of not knowing what the dangers are or how to read the signs in the snow to lead to disaster. And that's what happened with them. There was too little knowledge in their ski race group and in Solden, Austria that day, and we want to solve for that in your lives. So we're very happy that we can bring this program to you. We trust that you'll all listen and spread the word about our Brass Avalanche, Brass 101s. This will be recorded on our website, so you can follow it there. It's my pleasure to introduce our presenter tonight, Lel Tone, coming to us from Lake Tahoe, California. She grew up in Switzerland, and by age 3, she was skiing. She was educated in New England, but didn't take her long to figure out that she wanted more snow than we have in New England. So she moved to Tahoe and has been a part of the ski patrol there for several decades and added to her skills the snow avalanche mitigation and forecasting a couple of decades ago. So she's deeply experienced. She's also a level 2 avalanche educator certified by ARI. But the main thing that impresses me about Lel is that when 2 young ski racers died in the Tahoe area, I think about 10 or 15 years ago, she took it upon herself to teach the young ski racers about avalanche safety. She didn't have an organization like Brass around her, but she did it on her own because it was the right thing to do. So it's my pleasure to introduce Lel Tone.
Thank you, Cindy. Thanks so much for allowing me to be here this evening. It's such an incredible program to be a part of and so important. I've, been lucky enough to make a lifetime of work in the mountains, and I feel super blessed for that. But welcome to all of you this evening, and thanks for showing up to get yourself educated. I guess the biggest question is, why is this important to you guys? And as we heard from Cindy, it's really, really important because your life depends on it, basically. So I applaud all of you guys for being here this evening and being good about getting yourself dialed in for the season. Why is avalanche education important? It's incredibly important because hopefully you guys will be having amazing days in the mountains and coming back safely. So really tuning in and getting educated is super important. So how many of you out there this evening have taken an Avalanche Level 1 course or an avalanche awareness course? So it's awesome for those of you that are first timers. For those of you that are well into this, we hope this can be a great refresher course for you. I, as Cindy mentioned, have been learning for 2 decades now. And I got to tell you that I am still learning things. I'm still seeing things in Alaska heli guiding or doing avalanche control at Squaw Valley that are totally new to me that I've never seen before. So I like to say, welcome to your avalanche apprenticeship. This is a lifelong process. It's something that you need to continue working on and continuing to get tidbits of information out there and obviously putting it to work. So what is an avalanche, you guys? Basically, it's a bunch of moving snow down the mountain. There's 2 kinds of avalanches out there. One is a loose snow avalanche, or sometimes you guys might have heard them referred to as sloughs. Those start at a single point and entrain more snow. And, that one little grain of snow that starts rolling down the hill and grabs a hold of all of its friends can be actually a fairly massive avalanche if it gets to be 500 or 1,000 feet down the hill. But the ones we're most concerned about are these slab avalanches. And basically, these are things that are out there that we need to learn how to recognize and avoid. The reality is, in order for there to be a slab avalanche, you have to have a slab sitting on a weak layer and on a slope that's steep enough to slide. And then the last little piece of that is an avalanche trigger. So learning how to avoid avalanches is the best way to stay safe. So let's dig into it a little further. So here are the stats. About 27 folks die in the United States, 100 in Europe, 10 in Canada. And over the years, we've seen this number. There was kind of a big spike in this number. And with all the avalanche education and all the hard work of avalanche educators out there, we've kind of seen it level out, despite, as you guys can imagine, so many people increasingly getting out into the backcountry. Backcountry's hip. We saw it explode during COVID. And so what's super, super important is understanding that if you're getting out in the snow, no matter what activity, whether you're a snow machiner, a snowshoer, a sledder, a skier, avalanches don't discriminate. So getting your education and being really good about it. I don't know if you guys can see in this photo, the photo to the right was a fatal avalanche, and you guys can see that happen just outside of a parking lot. People let their guard down when they're close to the resorts or close to the parking lot, and that avalanche actually killed a snowshoer who triggered the avalanche from below. If you guys can see the other photo on the left, the smaller photo, that was triggered by a snowboarder who was just building a kicker and using that slope to land on. And that's just these small innocuous slides that actually killed people. So recognizing avalanche terrain is going to be key to it. So this program is really cool. We're just trying to break it down for you because there can be so much information and sometimes you feel like you're being fire hosed with information, but let's just keep it simple, right? The KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. Not sure if you guys have heard that one, but it's a good one that I try to live by. So most important tonight, we're going to talk about in our avalanche awareness course. Number one, getting the forecast, understanding how we can access the information, the most important information out there from our local forecasting centers. Getting the gear, having the right gear, never going into the backcountry without the right gear is going to be critical. Of course, getting the training, and you guys are starting that process here tonight, right now. And then using all of that information to get the picture real time when you're out there in the backcountry, moving through it, and things that you need to be aware of. So let's talk about the first one, getting the forecast. And you guys need to promise me one thing. For the rest of the winter, when you guys wake up in the morning on a storm day, whether you're going to the resort or you're going backcountry skiing or you're going to go play out there, you have to promise me before lurking on Facebook, before checking your gram, that you get to your local avalanche center and you check the forecast. Please make that promise to me. And the more you do this, the more you really start to synthesize your knowledge, the more you start understanding the snowpack that you're dealing with in your home area. But we're going to talk to you about how and where to go to get this information and where you can find the forecast.
What up, got you, buddy. We got you, buddy. We got you, buddy. We're right here. We got you. What up, buddy? We got you, buddy. We got you, buddy. We're right here. We got you.
Whether you're walking your dog, skiing, snowboarding, snowshoeing, snowmobiling, if you're heading out into mountains that have snow, you need to get an avalanche forecast.
The cool thing about forecasting is you're taking all of these different data points and all this really complex information and you're synthesizing it into something simple.
Did you these two in there?
Nikki, 80 is -2, 90 -3, so nice temperature gradient there between those two layers.
We're looking at observations from the public, from professional users, observations that we personally get in the field. And what we mean by those observations is snow pit results, new snow instabilities, wind, weather, anything that's actually going on in the backcountry, recent avalanches.
This is 2 to 4 millimeter. It's near surface facets.
Then we're putting that all in together and we're trying to get one simplified bottom line statement for what's going on.
Avalanche forecasts can really come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Different centers might use a little different format. But the bottom line, all of us are focusing about on the same information across the globe.
No matter where you are in the world, avalanche information is right at your fingertips.
And that's going to be weather information, snowpack information, information about recent avalanches, and what the overall avalanche danger is in a mountain range.
When you first check the forecast, one of the first things you're going to see is that bottom line statement. In that, we're going to discuss the avalanche danger scale.
The avalanche danger scale consists of 5 ascending levels from low to extreme. Your chance of encountering an avalanche increases dramatically with each level.
So we've got this scale that discusses size and distribution, the likelihood, and then overall travel advice for the day. Beyond just the bottom line statement, we're going to see avalanche problems.
It's just really important to recognize that there's different types of avalanches. The avalanche forecast is going to give you that information, which ultimately you can use to make better choices in the mountains.
You get the overall hazard, and then
An avalanche forecast isn't just done by one person. It's a huge team effort, not only by the forecast staff, but also by our local communities. What I find so special about the mountains is really the freedom and the friendships that you create out there. And it's my hope that other people can go into the mountains and experience this same joy that I do, and ultimately at the end of the day, come home safe.
So as you guys can see, there's a ton of information to be ascertained in these avalanche forecasts. And our avalanche forecasters do such incredible work in terms of giving us not only what's happening within the snowstorm, so they'll give us a weather synopsis, but they'll also give us a snow synopsis and what to expect, and are going to be the biggest problems that we might encounter in the backcountry. They also do an incredible job telling you about other hazards that might be out there regardless of the avalanche hazard. So for example, if you go through a very firm cold period and there's the potential to slip and fall on ice, they might discuss that in the avalanche forecast. Snow immersion, you know, if skiing in the trees and potentially going headfirst into a tree well, they'll just kind of give you all sorts of extra tidbits within that avalanche forecast. So where do we go to find these? So in the United States, you guys be ready to go to avalanche.org. And what's awesome about avalanche.org, you guys can see, is you'll get this interactive page. And so you can basically click on whatever zone you might, if it's not your home zone that you are concerned about. Let's say you're going to train in Jackson Hole and you want to see what's going on in the Tetons. You basically can click on that link and find the corresponding local avalanche center in that area. There's also some amazing apps out there that can link you to your local forecast center with your location set on your phone. In Canada, it's avalanche.ca. So if you guys are traveling this year and you end up going to Canada, that's where you need to go. And in Europe, it's avalanches.org. So really important if you're, you know, planning to go on a trip, or you're going to be training, or you're going to be overseas, start tuning into that snowpack, start getting prepared, start understanding what's going on in the areas that you're visiting. So as you can see on avalanche.org, as I mentioned, it's color coded. So in this particular picture, you can see that Colorado is going through a really bad avalanche cycle, right? Everything's red or orange there, you know, and things in the Sierras where I am look like in the moderate. So it kind of gives you a really good overview of what's going on in your area or the places that you want to visit. So let's dig into the danger level. I know they talked about it in that video, but this is basically what it looks like. So, you know, low avalanche danger, I like to think the world is your oyster. You can go anywhere you want, you know, it's generally safe to travel in the backcountry, but unstable snow on isolated terrain features is something that you're going to need to watch out for. Obviously, when it's extreme, we should be watching Netflix. We're probably shoveling for our lives at our house, snow blowing, spending the whole day just clearing snow at your house. But when we're in the moderate, considerable high, you know, those are things we need to be really, really good about evaluating what the avalanche problem is and having a heightened sense of concern about it. You know, one thing that I like to think about is, my friend Ingrid Backstrom had a great analogy. She said to me, you know, if there was a considerable chance that you were going to get food poisoning by going to that new Thai restaurant in town, would you go? And I said, absolutely not. Of course not. But when we see considerable in the snow forecast, we think, maybe we can evaluate, maybe we can be really good about understanding what the hazard is and avoiding avalanche terrain. But what do you think is where people are most often killed in avalanches? Yep, there you see it. Actually, inconsiderable and moderate. So I would say if you guys pull up the avalanche forecast and you see considerable hazard, that should be a red flag. You either need to be really, really good about staying out of the terrain where those dangerous avalanche conditions are, and really be good about evaluating in the field. So pretty interesting little stat there. So avalanches can be a whole host of things. They can be very, very big avalanches. Class 5 avalanches, we call. Class 5 avalanches are avalanches that could take out a whole village. We've seen that happen in Europe over the years, or very smaller class 1 avalanches. But there's all sorts of different types out there. We've got hard slab avalanches, soft slab avalanches. But as we talked about earlier, it's these slabs that are the ones that we're worried about. So, how does the forecast help you? Well, we mentioned earlier that avalanche safety is all about timing, right? Some days the mountains are telling you, come on out, come play. And then sometimes the mountains are telling you, you know what? Today's not your day. So we need to be really, really good about recognizing those days that we can get out there with relative safety and the days that maybe we should plan on going skate skiing, getting some projects done at home, going and skiing within the ski area boundary, you know, during considerable and high avalanche days, and thinking about wearing your transceiver and carrying your shovel and your probe. But we really need to think of what Mother Nature is allowing us to do. And it might not be what we want to do. It might not be our plan, but we need to be flexible and work with her on that. So we need to get the appropriate gear, right? After we get the forecast, we need to make sure that we have all the right gear to get out safely in the backcountry. So we need to be carrying that gear at all times, and know that it's super important that we're there to be able to activate a companion rescue situation should one of your partners get caught in an avalanche. So we're going to kind of go over that here quickly. So.
But I feel like there is so many new users to the backcountry. It scares me. It scares me that everyone thinks I just buy this expensive gear and I can get on the chairlift and I'll be fine. Get the gear, but get the education, understand how to use it, and have solid backcountry partners.
I'm worried about storm slabs in alpine and tree line on all slopes.
Avalanche observed yesterday on the parkway. Slabs expected on all aspects.
The reality is, backcountry is getting busier and busier. There's just more and more people out there. So with that comes a higher level of risk.
We've all heard a lot of stories about people who didn't even have a beacon on or no shovel, no probe. And that would have been the thing that would have saved them.
Sure.
It is a really pretty helpless situation to be in if you don't have the right tools.
There's my milkshakes!
There's really no outside help. You know, it's really up to their partners to get to them as quickly as possible and know how to use a transceiver, a probe, and a shovel, use it well, and dig them out of the snow.
What's it like?
In a full burial, your heart's beating and you don't know how long you're going to be riding it out for and how much oxygen you're eventually going to have. Time is of the essence. I would want to know when I'm going to the backcountry that I have a solid partner and they're super familiar with using that equipment.
We're right here. We got you.
If you've been in an avalanche and someone's buried, that's where having the gear and knowing how to use it can make all the difference in the outcome.
So yeah, having the right gear is critical, but as they mentioned in that, knowing how to use it is so important. And it was interesting, I actually was having a chat with one of our new rookie patrollers at Palisades Tahoe just last night. And I was relaying a story that as a new patroller, when I was going out doing avalanche control, I wanted to be the one in harm's way. I wanted to be the one ski cutting because I was a little insecure, like, what if an avalanche actually occurs and I need to get out my equipment and look for my partner? How would that feel? So I've obviously come a long way and I feel a lot more confident with my equipment, but, you know, we'll talk a little bit about how important it is to have obviously an avalanche transceiver and know how to use it. You know, this is the most important piece of equipment. And you know, this is something that you need to train with and learn to become very familiar with. So the most important piece, right, makes you searchable to your partner and allows you to search for them. So it's a self-rescue device. And if I could just say one thing, super, super important that you guys are replacing your avalanche transceivers maybe every 5 years. You know, these things can definitely get old. And we want them to be in perfect working order. So making sure that you guys are being good about replacing those transceivers. A probe, that is a very, very critical piece. And, you know, what I want to point out is you don't just have a transceiver. You have to have a probe and a shovel, because what are you going to do if you don't have a probe to actually locate and confirm where your partner is? What if you start digging and you're digging in the wrong location? You can obviously imagine that that is a very time-consuming process. So this probe is going to show you the precise location of your potential partner before you actually take the time-consuming part to shovel. So avalanche shovel, super, super important piece. Just so you guys know, this is the most time-consuming part. You know, we hopefully with a lot of practice are able to locate a victim in about 3 minutes with a transceiver, you know, another 50 seconds maybe with the probe, but the shoveling part takes the very most time. So making sure that you've got a stout aluminum shovel with actually a fairly large blade is going to be super important. So all of your partners need all 3 items. When I was doing this brass presentation to the ski teams a week or so ago in Copper, you know, I said, would you ever show up to a race with just your ski boots? Absolutely no. You would need your bindings and your skis. It's the same with this life-saving system. You need all 3 because you've got very little time to get that person out of the snow and to get them an airway. So practicing with this, being super confident with it, and knowing the ins and outs of your safety equipment is super important. Avalanche airbags. I don't heli ski guide without one. And I've actually, in my career, been caught in a very large slough avalanche when I was filming at one point, and I was able to pull my airbag, and it was like the hand of God. Basically took me from dark, compressed, deep in the avalanche, and it basically brought me to the surface. You know, the way these things work is it's called the Brazil nut theory. And basically, if you were to take a bowl of nuts, right, at a party with peanuts, you know, all cashews, all of those nuts, and you were basically to shake the bowl of nuts, can you guys imagine which nuts would come to the surface? Those big old Brazil nuts. So basically, these airbags are just making you the biggest nut that you can be, and hopefully will bring you to the surface of the avalanche, so that you're visible to your partners. So, you know, obviously these airbags are an important piece, but, you know, just because you're wearing an airbag doesn't mean you can make silly decisions in the backcountry, right? It's just one added piece of rescue gear. Being prepared when you travel off-piste or out of the ski area boundary, or even for a day of backcountry skiing, or, you know, when I climbed Denali with some girlfriends a number of years ago, the further out you go, the more gear you need to have, because, you know, you might have to be prepared to wait for help should something really bad happen out there. So having extra layers, extra gloves, a really good repair kit, a multi-tool, a really good first aid kit, oxygen mask. You know, it's great to have all these GPSs and stuff on our phones, but obviously if we're out there for a prolonged period of time, you know, those phones are going to die. So things we might want to think about are map and compass, right? Sunscreen, food, water, etc. So really thinking about, the further you go, the more you should be prepared, the more gear you might actually have to bring. So radios are awesome. Up there, the BCA radio is one I use when I'm heli guiding in Alaska with my clients. It's really helpful to, you know, should you guys get spread out on a backcountry tour, you still have really good communication with each other to make plans. You know, sometimes it's really bad visibility. So having a radio can just increase communication in the field. And as we know, with more communication comes better decision making. So if the worst thing occurs, right, and there's been an avalanche and your partner's caught, time is of the essence. You know, basically 25% of avalanche fatalities are caused by trauma. So 1 out of every 4 people potentially out there are going to be folks that you can't save, no matter how good you are at companion rescue, no matter how good you are with your gear. But it's the other 75% that we really want a fighting chance, you know? So it's really important. Speed and time is of the essence. So on this next slide, you guys can see we have about 10 minutes. You know, that's not a lot of time. That is, we need to be really good with our transceivers. We need to be really good with all of our gear. We need to have certain strategies. And if you guys go on to take a companion rescue class, you're going to learn all of these amazing strategies for strategic shoveling, for probing techniques, for all of these things. But, you know, getting to your partner quickly and getting them in airspace is going to be super, super important. And obviously, the quicker we do it, the quicker their chances of surviving the event is. So it's not a lot of time to work with. So we need to be practicing and practicing and really getting good with our gear. So gear can find your body, but partners can save your life, right? So having people that you're going into the backcountry that you trust, that you know are practicing with their gear. You know, I always love to, at the beginning of the season, with the folks that I'm going to be backcountry skiing with, or even with my Avalanche partners on Ski Patrol, we go out and we do a bunch of training, a bunch of practice, and get ourselves tuned up for the season. Because, you know, these skills have a shelf life. And if you're not constantly working on them, right, then you're blowing it. So we want you guys to be able to take care of each other out there in the backcountry. So knowing how to use your gear is critical. So the next piece of the puzzle, right, is getting the training. And you'll see here why training is so essential, what you can learn, and also just understanding, as I pointed out earlier, that this training is a lifelong process. It's something that we continue throughout our careers.
I was so keen at that point in time and really didn't know what was safe and not. That Avalanche was definitely a bit eye-opening to how quickly things can go wrong in the backcountry. I got lucky, but unfortunately, a lot of people do not. With a little bit of avalanche training, a lot of accidents can be avoided. Looking at the bulletin, it's been warm yesterday and then cooled down quite a bit overnight. Probably the main concern today would be the wet loose on the sunny aspect. If anybody has the motivation to go out into the backcountry, whether that's skiing, sledding, riding, I would say an entry-level avalanche course is totally critical. Perfect. Your general entry-level avalanche course will have fundamental knowledge about avalanches, how snow and layers and snowpack work. We're just looking for a good site for a profile. Let's dig. Typically, you do a little bit of avalanche rescue practice, so you get your transceivers out, probe, shovel. And the beacon just comes down to the knee, and you just move forward. Practice with that gear so that you know what to do if something were to go wrong. That's it. A little bit about trip planning, reading the avalanche hazard bulletins, and then sort of picking a suitable trip. You'll do a little bit about traveling through avalanche terrain.
The number one problem of the day was the wet loose avalanches, which is what's raising the avalanche hazard for the day. We've got a little one starting. That's a good indicator of where things are going.
Well, the mountains and the snowpack can feel quite complex at times. The sort of entry-level avalanche courses give you some fundamental knowledge that allows you to maybe make sense of some of the things that you're observing out in the mountains. And that fundamental knowledge can be useful to avoid avalanche accidents. I personally couldn't imagine a life without skiing and climbing in the mountains. It just gives you so much vitality in your life, which is awesome. With anything, to be a master of your craft takes a lot of practice and a lot of time, and it's an ongoing sort of lifelong learning process. I've been working with avalanches for 15 years now, and I'm still learning every day. I was so keen at that point in time.
So obviously there's a lot you can learn in these avalanche courses. And what's going to be really important is this, this avalanche awareness thing this evening is just a start. Being able to get in the field and to take an avalanche level 1 course, continuing with an avalanche rescue supplemental course, potentially moving on to get an avalanche level 2 course. All of these things build on one another. So the more excited you get about it, the more you learn, you can take it to the next level. But, you know, it is a lifelong process. And as I mentioned, even as a professional ski patroller and heli ski guide, you know, I am constantly seeking out avalanche education for myself, whether it's teaching with other instructors or taking a ski guides course, mostly just for the professional development. So I really encourage you guys to continue on in this process. You know, the important thing in this avalanche training is just to get you to tune in your avalanche eyeballs. It's basically Mother Nature is very, very kind, and she's telling you all the things that you need to know to have a safe day in the backcountry. I'll never forget learning how to surf at 30 years old. I realized that when I looked at the ocean, I didn't see anything but the beautiful water. And, you know, if you're coming to the mountains as a skier, sometimes all you see is the tasty line that you want to ski. You're not actually seeing what Mother Nature's telling you. And I don't know, take a look in this photo up on the screen, and maybe tuning in your avalanche eyeballs, you guys can see something there on the left side. Can you guys see a slab avalanche there? Yeah. So, you know, looking around, using those eyeballs, you know, the mountains are obviously telling you right then and there that the snowpack is not stable, especially on that aspect. But did you guys see this other loose snow avalanche on the other side? So, you know, the more you learn to tune your eyeballs in, the more you're going to see. You know, you see all sorts of aspects. You can see where the wind direction's coming from. So all sorts of information becomes basically there for you. You know, there's a lot going on in the mountains, and we need to be able to slow down, know what to look for, and tune into what Mother Nature's telling you. You know, as you go through your avalanche education, it'll allow you to unlock the mountains even more and see them in a way that maybe you've never seen them before. So avalanche education is easy, it's fun. I love teaching these courses. I love seeing folks get totally fired up on what they're learning. Our mountain environment is so dynamic and so incredible. But these are some really good resources for you guys. The Utah Avalanche Center.org has a really, really good website and all sorts of online learning courses for you there. Also, your local avalanche centers are going to kind of tune you into a lot of other potentially free avalanche training opportunities in your area. There's also ARI, which is avtraining.org. ARI is one of the bigger avalanche providers. And if you go to their website, avtraining.org, you can find really good level 1 or level 2 classes in your area. So I encourage you guys to reach out and look into that and figure out where you might be able to take a course. If I could just add one more thing on the avalanche education part, I have students that often come and take a level 1 and they want to take a level 2 the next year. And there is so much information in these courses. It's a really, really important piece of it is put to work the things that you're learning. Don't force feed your avalanche education. Take a level 1 and then take some time to synthesize that information and find some good partners, find some good mentors, get into the backcountry and really think about doing this process slowly. You're going to get a lot more out of it. So after you get the education or get the training, you want to get the picture. So you want to be able to understand avalanche terrain, to be able to basically know when you're traveling in avalanche terrain and when you're not. That is a huge piece of the puzzle. Understand different ways to travel in the backcountry. We call these travel techniques, and these are ways to further put the odds in your favor by only exposing one person at a time. And then also looking and being able to recognize the warning signs. What is Mother Nature telling us about how things are happening real time in the field?
Avalanche terrain is simply terrain steep enough to shred.
Reality is that fun places in the backcountry are the places where avalanches are possible. It only takes one bad mistake to
Avalanche, killed in an avalanche.
to lead to a lot of pain for a lot of people.
In order to safely travel in the backcountry, you need to understand the bigger picture. Firstly, you need to recognize avalanche terrain and how to safely travel through it. Secondly, you need to constantly observe the ever-changing conditions.
Welcome to the final chapter.
It's really important to understand that the second you step in the backcountry, you're going into terrain that hasn't received any active avalanche mitigation.
It's important that you can recognize avalanche terrain. By definition, avalanche terrain is any slope steeper than 30 degrees.
No one can be a perfect avalanche forecaster. Snow science is an inexact science.
When you look at the forecast in the morning and make that assessment, you have to be prepared for the fact that the conditions could actually change during the day.
The one constant is terrain, and what we can do is position ourselves with best terrain practices through it. So you think about moving to the mountains, there is safe zone to safe zone, and it's those best terrain practices that set us up for success. We're all going out as a group for the A objective, but along the way, we may have some sort of weather characteristic that changes that decision.
It's really helpful to just have some big red flags that are telling you it's time to reevaluate. And those things are rapid snowfall, rapid wind, shooting cracks, woompfing, recent avalanches, or rapid warm-up.
We've just moved to the trees, and at this point, wherever we go is avalanche terrain. In order to minimize our exposure as a group, we're going to go from safe zone to safe zone, moving one at a time through this terrain.
Having guidelines are very effective ways to give yourself a framework where you're less inclined to make emotional decisions that could be bad ones.
Just like on the way up, we're going to expose one person at a time on this slope. I'm about to drop in. Do you guys have eyes on?
Yep.
Awesome, let's do that.
Dropping in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
The skill set to safely travel in the backcountry is something that's achievable by anybody. It's important that you dedicate yourself to understanding the basics.
So you've got the gear, you've got the training, you've got the forecast, you've got the picture. Let's go get the goods.
Heck yeah, I love that. Let's go get the goods. I'm sitting here in Tahoe and we have an incoming storm. I think we're going to get a couple feet in the next day and a half, which is going to be awesome. But anyways, stoked that winter's coming and stoked to get the goods. But as they discussed in that short clip, you know, avalanche terrain and being able to recognize it is critical, and it definitely takes some training and it takes some time. One of the tools that you can have, and they actually have apps for this as well, is a slope inclinometer, which can actually help you learn to tune your eyeballs in. But again, we talked about that 30 to 45 degree slope angle, which is kind of prime time. And so we know that if we can learn to recognize when you're in avalanche terrain, you can also learn how to avoid it, and so being able to, as they said, move through this terrain so that you can avoid avalanches completely if the avalanche hazard is high. So on to the next slide. Do you think that that bigger picture there is 30 degrees? Yes, absolutely. I think what's interesting here is you can see that that slab avalanche broke out and that there's actually some ski tracks of people traversing through there. But, the reality is that prime time avalanche terrain is exactly where we usually like to ski, So, if we can learn to recognize when we're in it, we can, or when we're not in it, that's a really important point of the equation, because terrain is the one thing that we can control in this mountain environment, So what about that next slide? Is that 30 degrees? No, absolutely not. And it looks like those guys are having one heck of a good day dropping around on the flats, and I guess that's one thing that I would just like to say is I have had so many incredible days in the backcountry with friends on considerable and high avalanche hazard. But I've made the safe decision, my partners and I have made the safe decision to just stay out of avalanche terrain. And we've had some incredible skiing days in, the 20 degree, below 30 degree range. And I think the most important thing is you're just out there with friends in the fresh air, having fun, and avoiding being underneath avalanche terrain or in avalanche terrain on those higher hazard days. So why does it matter? Well, using your eyes to identifying avalanche terrain is important because it keeps us off and away from the slopes that can potentially avalanche. Most importantly, we need to know where to go if there's avalanche hazard, right? So the forecasting centers are going to do a really, really great job on telling you the slopes that you need to avoid the most. And following through with that is a key part of the puzzle. So, I like to always ask myself when I'm traveling in the backcountry, what if an avalanche were to occur? Am I standing in a good spot? If they're talking about a persistent slab that is potentially remotely triggered, do I want to be snowshoeing or skate skiing along the flats underneath these huge slide paths? Probably not. That's probably not a great place because there is a potential for overhead hazard. So really asking yourself, am I in avalanche terrain? And if an avalanche occurred right now, am I in its path, right? And so that's how we can avoid getting caught. Also, staying on high ground, being really careful about who you're traveling above or below is super, super important. Let's go back one slide, Tom, if we could, just to see what's wrong here. Can you guys see these travel techniques? Are these guys exposing only one person to hazard at a time? No, we've got close to 10 people high marking on that one slope. We've got a bunch of people ski touring right up a known avalanche path. So really being good about what are the travel techniques that you could employ or the places that you could be so that you're not in harm's way like these guys are here. So in area, So as a ski patroller, having done it for almost 2 years, I work really hard and my crew works really hard to make the ski resort safe for you, even on the highest avalanche days. But the reality is, as much as we use the explosives, and I can honestly say, we use, I think at Palisades Tahoe, between Alpine and Palisades, we use more hand charges than all of Colorado and Wyoming combined. And the reality is, we also often have inbounds avalanches. I think the stats are, in the United States, on average, 1 person is killed a year in an avalanche related incident inbounds. So on those really big days, it's a really good idea to have your beacon shovel probe. If it's one of those like intense storm days where you're seeing high or extreme avalanche hazard on the forecast, and you've made the really smart decision not to go in the backcountry, but to go in the ski resort, which is a really good call on those scary days, I would tell you, here's my little patrol hat going on, that if you can wear a beacon and carry your shovel and probe, you're going to be in a good position, because we do have incidents as much as we don't want to admit it. So out of area, need to be really clear that the moment you step through a gate out of the ski area boundary in the United States or in Canada, you are on your own. You are out of a controlled environment, and all of those things that we need to think about in the backcountry apply. So recognizing that the ski patrol might not be 10 minutes out, you know? So recognizing that you guys need to be responsible for your own rescue, and recognize that you are actually traveling into the backcountry. For those of you that are going to Europe, it's a little bit different, you know? And as we learned from that incident in Austria, the moment you step off a groomed run in Europe, you might as well be entering the backcountry, you know? And that's a really tricky thing for us to tune our eyeballs into, you know? Those guys were on a groomer. They saw some fresh snow. They saw a groomer down below them, and they thought, oh, we're just going to drop in between here and there. You know, there's 35 people skiing past us, you know, 50 feet away. Nothing bad can happen. But in reality, when you choose to go off a groomer in Europe, you are in an uncontrolled area. So think about that in terms of, you are in the backcountry in those resorts in Europe, basically. So in that video, they talked about how important it is to constantly be evaluating real time in the field, right? You know, the avalanche forecasters are going to do a really good job preparing you for a day in the backcountry. They're going to tell you what's going on with a snowstorm, but things can change quickly. And it's really, really important for you guys to be conscious and know that this is a fluid experience, and that things real time might not be exactly what they talked about in the forecast, right? So how do we know when avalanche conditions are changing, right? The snowpack is always talking, and it's our job to understand how to listen, or listen to them. They're not a random act of nature, right? And we usually can tell when they're about to happen. For example, in this picture right here on the left, what do you think that is indicative of? You see, an avalanche has occurred. Did it happen recently, right? So look for those signs, and we're going to just quickly go through the red flags, or those indicators, those things that we really, really want to pay attention to in the backcountry. As I said, recent avalanches are a huge one, right? That is basically Mother Nature telling you that there's a problem, Houston. And so we need to take note immediately. Are those aspects, are they similar aspects to what we want to ski, right? So recognizing where they're happening is super important as well. Cracking or collapsing or woomphing. I don't know if you guys ever heard that, but basically that woomph is a sound that weak layer is collapsing. So that slab is collapsing and there is potential for an avalanche, but maybe it's just not steep enough to slide. So cracking and collapsing is that second red flag. Wind drifted snow. When it's windy, when there's snow being moved from one side of the mountain to the other, you know, the mountain doesn't know whether the snow is actually coming out of the sky or whether it's coming from one side of the mountain to the other. All it knows is that there is more stress on that snowpack. So you're building wind slabs and you're building stress on that snowpack. So think about watching for wind and wind and snow. Heavy snowfall or rain. In Tahoe, in our maritime climate, we often get rain on snow. And basically that is adding weight, but not adding any strength to the snowpack. You know, when we have heavy snowfall, we're talking over an inch an hour, right? We know that the avalanche danger is on the rise. So it's adding weight to that potentially weak snowpack. Another really important one is rapidly rising temperatures, right? When we have that thaw instability. And we can see instant avalanches happening on those south-facing slopes. It happens in Alaska all the time, late in the spring when we have those long days. You know, as everything's fine and the avalanche hazard is fairly stable in the morning, but we hit a critical point when all of a sudden you're taking all your layers off and you're skiing, you know, in your wind jacket, and you realize that you're starting to see those roller balls, you're starting to see point releases, wet snow avalanches. So keep an eye out for those rapidly rising temperatures. So I know that's a ton of information. Sometimes you feel like totally fire hosed with information. There's a lot to think about, but what we hope is that in this avalanche awareness class, we kind of broke it down into like bite-sized bits. So hopefully now you guys understand how you can access the forecast and what it's going to give you and how important it is to planning a safe day in the backcountry. Obviously, having all the right gear, right? You would never think about going out of bounds or out into the backcountry, into avalanche terrain without that super important rescue gear, but also practicing and knowing how to use it is important. You know, getting the training, continuing this avalanche process is super, super important. And then getting the picture, recognizing real time all the things that Mother Nature and the mountains are trying to tell you to clue you into what the avalanche hazard is actually doing real time.
One of the most important factors in snow safety is decision making. Hi, I'm Jess Shade. I'm a mental health therapist and a high altitude ski mountaineer, and I'm thrilled to join Brass Avalanche in providing insight into how you can be safe in the backcountry. What do all fatal avalanches have in common? Snow, of course, and people. We are the common denominator. Today we are going to cover the following topics: awareness, decision-making and risk, group dynamics, and goal-driven choices. How aware are you right now? What are your surroundings? Who is with you? What did you do right before logging on? As humans, our brains value efficiency. We can't pause to think about every single movement, from brushing our teeth to walking the dog. We often find ourselves on autopilot. However, sometimes exiting autopilot really matters. When you are considering exiting resort boundaries, skiing off-piste in restricted areas, how aware are you? Are you slowing down long enough to ask, do I have the training? Do I have avalanche gear? Who am I with? What's the danger rating? And what are the avalanche problems today? Awareness is the first step to both safety and fun. So in terms of self-knowledge, how do you make decisions? Do you trust your gut? Do you assess every potentiality? Do you ask someone else and follow their advice? Is it a mix of these? Thinking about this from the perspective of an athlete, how do you train and prepare? Do you have a plan for a race or for an event? How intentional are you? Also under self-knowledge, how do you view risk? How do you know if the risk is worth the reward? To aid in evaluating risk, here's a straightforward tool called the risk equation. So your risk score equals the likelihood of the risk occurring multiplied by the severity should the risk occur, multiplied by the time of exposure to the risk. If you can't answer the risk equation, you're gambling. Is it worth it? Often we do not find ourselves making decisions and evaluating risk alone. We're in a group, which can complicate things. So here are some questions to ask yourself before stepping out into off-piste or backcountry terrain. Who are you with? Just a simple list of the people can cue our awareness. How well do you know them? How do they make decisions and view risk? What is their knowledge? Are they trustworthy in avalanche terrain? Are you trying to impress them? Could you tell them no if you wanted to? Would you follow them no matter what? When we cede our ability to make decisions about risk, we outsource our safety. Goals are important to all of us, especially in athletic endeavors like skiing and snowboarding. Goals are one of the best ways to direct intentional decision-making. So what is your goal? Why are you out there? Is your goal to stoke train, peer pressure, impressing a teammate, or is it different? Often we are motivated by things that aren't actually our goals. For example, social factors often influence our decisions, even if the decision works against a goal. I'll stay up late to hang out, but be exhausted for training, school, the new job I'm psyched about. Or, I'll exit the resort boundary because everyone else wants to, but I'd like to scout the course one more time to prepare for my race. Does this risk relate to my goal? And at what cost? Bryce Astle and Ronnie Burlack were skiers, just like you and I. They were great skiers. On that day in 2015, they made decisions, as did their teammates and their coaches. There were many decisions made that day that could have changed the outcome. Exiting the gates, skiing off-piste or closed terrain is stepping into risk. Are you aware of yourself and your partners? What goal do you have? How does skiing backcountry, out of area, or off-piste terrain relate to your goal? On behalf of Brass Avalanche, thank you for your attention. Be safe out there this winter.
So anyways, I want to thank you guys so much for being here this evening, for all of your attention. And at this point, I would love to open it up to some questions. I know we have a little bit of time here at the end to kind of maybe clean up on some of this stuff and answer any questions you guys might have. So.
Well, thank you very much, Lel. We do have a few questions. We have one in the Q&A from Patrick McCarthy. And just to kind of tee you up on this one, Lel, the first part of the question is about snowmobiles and other motorized vehicles in the backcountry. This actually is a pretty big issue in the Western Mountains, isn't it?
Absolutely. In fact, at one point, most recently, the mechanized category had basically the leading fatalities in all of the recreational users out there. And a lot of that was, with the advent of these newer, like high powered sleds, it used to be when you were snowmobiling, snow machining, sledding, whatever you want to call it, that these machines couldn't really actually get you into avalanche terrain. And now all of a sudden you're getting an RMK, an 800-pound sled right up into a starting zone of an avalanche, high marking. And so we were seeing a huge increase in fatalities. The good news about that is there's been a lot of education done to target that particular demographic. And so those numbers are continuing to go down, which is really awesome. And like those travel techniques for skiers, there's also a lot of travel techniques for snow machiners. One at a time is really important. Letting somebody high mark a slope, waiting till they get down to the bottom, then you go up and you give it a try. That way you're not exposing more than one person. Another huge one for me when I'm out sledding is making sure that I don't shut my machine off at the bottom of a slope while I'm watching my homies high mark, making sure that I'm well out of the run out. And there might be days where I'm out of the run out and I actually don't turn my sled off, or I keep my sled facing downhill so that if something was going to happen, I could, I'm not there trying to start my cold sled to outrun an avalanche. So yeah, there's definitely some really good travel techniques. The tough thing, we talked about tuning in your avalanche eyeballs and really listening to the snowpack. You can imagine that one of those red flags that we talked about, wolfing, might be something that you completely miss underneath your helmet with a sled running super loud. You're basically kind of taken away from that environment just a little bit, given the machinery and given the noise. So I always encourage, sledding friends to turn their sled off, get out, poke around in the snow, walk around, really see what's going on, but shut the engine off and really tune into what you're hearing, seeing, that kind of thing. Because it can be tricky underneath a full face helmet with a lot of noise.
Good points, Lel. Same from Patrick McCarthy, completely different topic. If you are unfortunate enough to get caught in a slide, what are some of the things you can do to kind of keep yourself above it, protect yourself for when you get buried? Are there any tips that you can give people?
Patrick, thanks for all the awesome questions. These are great ones. Yes. What to do if you're caught in an avalanche, and ski cutting at Palisades during avalanche control and ski guiding. I've had plenty of times where I've triggered avalanches, and it's really terrifying. I think first and foremost, scream, yell avalanche. Make sure that anybody within earshot knows that you are potentially getting caught in an avalanche and that they need to have eyes on you. The next thing is fight to get off of it. So if you can, and this is a heroic effort, but if you can kind of keep your speed down the fall line and try and ski off the top of that slab or get to high ground. At one point I was ski cutting, and high ground, I actually had to point it to this rocky outcropping, and I dry docked myself onto the rocks and the avalanche kept going. But try to get to high ground, try to get off the thing. If you get caught, hopefully your ski gear is going to come off. Your gear has a tendency to hold you down. I used to run a DIN setting of 10 on my skis because I didn't want to lose them. But after I got sucked down in an avalanche and I felt my skis actually pulling me deeper into the avalanche, I actually turned my DIN setting to 8, which is much more reasonable because I want to get out of my gear. But keep your feet below you. If you're going towards trees, you can at least kind of fend off and bounce yourself off trees, or at least try holding on to those trees so the avalanche goes past you. Trying to keep, as you tumble, try and keep something on the surface. So if you can raise your arms, keep something on the surface, your chances of being found increase substantially if you have a piece of your body exposed. I think one thing that I forgot to mention is if you are wearing an avalanche airbag, the moment you think you're in an avalanche, pull right away. Because the reality is if you start tumbling, you might not have a second chance to do that. So that is a huge part after you scream avalanche. And then as you come to rest, try and get something to the surface. And if you find that you're actually buried, the most important thing is to remain calm, to do your best Zen meditation, slow your breathing down, know that you have all the right gear on, that your partners have trained, that you know they're going to come looking for you. But screaming underneath the snow, people, no matter what's interesting, because I've been buried in a lot of dog holes when we're training our avalanche dogs, is you can hear, as the buried victim, you can hear everybody above you, but they cannot hear you screaming. So go to your happy place, stay calm, and know that help is on the way. So hopefully.
Lel, I want to thank you for taking your time to do this webinar tonight. And also a couple of weeks ago, giving along with Dale Atkins, giving the education of the U.S. ski team at Copper. We really appreciate it. For all of you on the call, look for Lel up in the mountain. If you're out at Palisades, Tahoe this winter, or you're heli skiing up in Alaska, look for her. She's a great asset to the brass team. Lel, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's been a pleasure. Hope to see you guys out there on the hill. Have a safe winter.
Lel Tone, thank you very much. We're going to now bring on Nina O'Brien from the U.S. ski team. Great to have her with us here tonight. Nina is joining us from her home in Denver right now before she gets back on the circuit. I hope all of you had an opportunity to watch her last weekend at Killington. Great return to action. Nina, thank you so much for joining us here tonight on Brass 101.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I want to first, before we learn a little bit about your background, I want to go back to last Saturday at Killington. You'd been off skis for a long time, a horrible accident, which we'll talk about at the Olympics. You just came out of the start gate charging on Saturday and got a good result. What were you thinking in that first run, your first race in what would have been 8 or 9 months?
Yeah, I was definitely a little nervous standing in the start gate, that's for sure. But I think I'm always a little nervous, kind of regardless of the race. And I think on that day, I felt like good warming up. I felt like my body was healthy. And in the moment in the start gate and during my run, I actually felt like really pretty free of my injury and light and just like really excited to be back in the start gate and racing again.
Well, I know I speak for all the fans. It was great to see you and great to see you put down a couple of good runs. For the folks who might not know, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, how you grew up in ski racing and how it's led you to the point that you're at today with the U.S. ski team?
Sure. So I grew up in San Francisco, and I guess like Lel, I was a big Palisades Tahoe skier my whole childhood growing up. So my family and I would drive up every weekend to Tahoe, and it really just started out as a family activity. Eventually, I joined the Tahoe League and the Squaw Valley or Palisades Tahoe ski team, and really fell in love with the racing side. So I definitely started with that more Tahoe free skiing background. And then as soon as I started getting into racing, I kind of got hooked. Which eventually led me to go to Burke Mountain Academy for all 4 years of high school, which I absolutely loved, and really thankful to have also been a part of that East Coast ski racing community. And from my senior year at Burke, I qualified for the U.S. ski team, and I think now this is my 6th or 7th year on the team. So it's been, skiing's been one of the greatest joys of my whole life and really led me to have some of my best friends in the world. So really thankful for all the various communities that I've been a part of on the way.
Nina, while you were at Burke, you got to know Ronnie Burlack, who was tragically killed in 2015. We're here tonight to talk about avalanche safety as well. Can you relate a little bit about Ronnie as you knew him at Burke and the importance that you and your teammates at the U.S. ski team see in avalanche safety education today?
Yeah, I think like Ronnie was really just bred light into any room he walked into. He was always smiling. And I think he loved to make people laugh. He was just this amazing, glowing human being. And I remember at Burke, he did a stand-up comedy skit at our talent show, and he was the person like always pushing hard. He had this iron will in physical testing. And I think that's exactly probably like what led him to love downhill. He seemed to have that like fearless passion for speed, and sheer will to go faster than anyone else, which I personally have never been able to have. But some qualities that I really love and miss in Ronnie. And I think, knowing Ronnie and how the impact he left on the team, especially in the wake of the Avalanche, is just that I think as professional skiers, we all get so comfortable being outside. But I think the harsh reality is that it can really happen to anyone at any point in time. And so I think that's probably why we're all so lucky and why we're all here today to get the education.
You spend most of your time, as do your teammates, racing down mountains on nice, groomy, icy courses. But have you seen now, since Brass has been around, a higher level of awareness of avalanche safety across the team?
I hands down, absolutely. I mean, I think it's hit us all to our core. And it really was a reality check that, again, like we race down these mountains, but now I think everyone is far more educated on, we spoke about in Europe, what's on and off piste and, what is potential hazardous terrain, also getting the forecast and getting the gear and the training. So Brass has had a huge impact on the team and the way we all approach avalanche safety.
Let's get back to ski racing now, and I'm not going to ask you to relive those moments at the bottom of the GS in Beijing, but I'd like you to talk about your rehab and what you did after that in the spring and in the summer to get yourself physically ready to get back into a World Cup starting gate.
It really just started with baby steps. So at first, early weeks and days out of surgery, I was just trying to start to move my foot again, wiggle my toes, all those things. I had an awesome physical therapist in Denver, and I was able to access one of my sponsors is a hyperbaric chamber, which helped me a lot with some swelling. But from there, it was really just quite a lot of rehab. I probably went 3 times a week all through the remainder of the winter, spring, and summer. So a lot of hours in physical therapy, a lot of learning to slow down and try and relearn how to walk and run and jump. But then also trying as best as I could to get the rest of my body, which was still healthy, as strong as possible, even while that one leg was healing. So I was trying to do pull-ups while I was still in a walking boot or stuff like that.
That's crazy. When did you get back on snow?
I started skiing end of September.
Great. And where did you do your on snow?
I went to an indoor skiing facility in Belgium called Snow Valley. And I think at first I thought indoor skiing might not be the most inspiring place to return to snow, but it actually was the best thing I could have possibly done. It was the most controlled environment in terms of snow conditions, a kind of mellow slope. And it was a great place for me to just sort of get those early reps in.
There were probably several pathways available for you to come back to competition. You could have gone into the Continental Cups, into the NORAM Cup, but you and your coaches chose to go right back at it in the World Cup. How did that decision come to pass?
I think it was largely led by me. Throughout this whole process, I would say that my coaches really haven't pushed me or put any pressure on me to be at the start gate of our World Cup or to rush the process whatsoever. In fact, I think most people were probably telling me to slow down and take my time, even more so than I did. But I was lucky that as soon as I got on snow, I felt like those skiing feelings and, what I remembered, muscle memory, it all came back. And on good days, when I don't have any pain, I really felt like myself out there again. And so I think those days gave me the confidence to get back to a World Cup race. And I also sort of figured, what do I have to lose?
Nothing really. So let's talk about the season ahead for Nina O'Brien. Where will you be going from here?
I'm headed to Italy on Friday. We have our next World Cup races are in Sestriere, coming up in about a week and a half, and then from there the season's just kind of rolling nonstop through Christmas and into January. So it gets pretty busy, and as of now, I'm hoping to race all the GS and Slalom World Cups, but I guess we'll just see how I'm skiing and how my body feels, and take it every day as it comes.
And you have a World Championships coming up in February as well.
Yeah, exactly. I really hope to be there, but I definitely have to get the results beforehand to make the team, but fingers crossed I can be there.
Well, Nina O'Brien, thank you so much for joining us here for our Brass 101 presentation tonight. Any final words for your fans out there?
No, I guess I would just thank everyone for being here and listening to me, and really wish you all a wonderful winter. Hope you guys have some awesome turns.
Same back to you. Nina O'Brien, thank you for joining us here tonight on Brass 101. We look forward to watching you throughout the season. Now we're going to close things out with a showing of Off-Piste, which is a very important educational film from Brass. I want to run you up through a couple of other points before we get there, so bear with me for just one moment here. And by the way, for any of you who have put questions in the chat or in the Q&A, if we didn't get to them tonight, we'll try to pick those up and get those to you offline. One of the things that I want to bring up to everyone is Brass is a nonprofit organization. We provide these training programs for free. If you feel like you can support the program yourself, get your phone out, put it up to the screen right now, capture the QR code, and if you could give us $10, $25, $50, $100, whatever it is tonight, it would help us to continue to provide this education to more people at no cost. We really feel that Brass is making a difference, but we need your help. Doesn't have to be a lot, but just something that will help us in the mission we have to bring this educational message to others. We're going to close it out tonight with a very emotional and poignant film, Off-Piste. This was released 4 years ago by Brass, and it's a recreation of the January 2015 accident that took the lives of Bryce Astle and Ronnie Burlack. I really encourage you to stick with it through the end of the film. It really does give you a lot of insights into what goes on in those tragic moments, and how hopefully with this education you have tonight, this will be the start of your lifelong learning process in snow safety. Join me now in watching Off-Piste.
Ronnie! You guys see him up there?
Guys, what should we do?
Start moving!
Are they wearing beacons?
No beacons.
Dispatch. Possible 2 avalanche victims buried. I see something. Is this one of your friends?
Yeah, that's Bryce.
No pulse. Starting CPR. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 2, 23, 24, 5, 6, 7, 8. Lift on 3. 1, 2, 3. Are you sure there were only 2?
Yeah, there's two.
There's 2. Okay, we're gonna find him.
Ronnie!
Not breathing, no pulse. Sorry, CPR.
Mother Nature can turn deadly in a matter of seconds.
It's hard to believe that such a tragedy could happen.
The accident has left many in the skiing world in shock.
Tragic news tonight as 2 elite skiers training for a spot on the U.S. Olympic team are killed in an avalanche.
Rescue crews from Solden were on the scene immediately with multiple helicopters.
Our thoughts and prayers are with those who are apparently lost in this specific incident.
Go for it, Brycey!
Who are you? I'm Bryce Astle. How does the gangster chains play into effect in your slalom skiing? Pretty aerodynamic.
Hey, turn up. Come on, Ronnie, arms up! Happy birthday to you.
I was shattered, and I know everyone around me was too, and can't even possibly imagine what it was like for the families.
Losing Bryce and Ronnie was a huge hit to the U.S. team. They're the next generation. These two guys were the best in their disciplines. Bryce in slalom, Ronnie in downhill and Super G. They were the next up-and-comers. They could be the guys competing in the Olympics.
This is the famous smile because he had just won U.S. Nationals Juniors.
He always had my back, and it makes you appreciate it more now that he's not here, you know?
Bryce was such an important part of my life, and after we lost him, it was a pretty easy decision for my wife and I to name our son Bryce.
He lived for every moment. He would get done training and he would go out and he would ski.
And this is a card that we made up at the time we lost the boys, and it has Bryce so amazing on skis and Ronnie in his element going 70 miles an hour through the air. He was kind and he was grounded.
Ronnie, he was always just a jokester. He wasn't afraid of the World Cup vet. He would just always speak his mind to me, and I love that about him, you know?
Watching him laughing just made me think, wow, I have the best brother ever.
He was a good teammate, he was a good friend, a good son, and we had a lot of fun together.
January 1st, 2015, I took Bryce to the airport. He was going to hook up with Ronnie Burlack and the rest of the U.S. ski team. They were going to Europe to train for Europa Cup.
We got to Solden, and it had just snowed a lot.
Obviously, there's no training because there's so much snow. So we sent everyone out to go ski around and have some fun.
Just seeing snow that's untouched and being like, this is a dream come true.
We were having an amazing time.
We could see the bottom of the valley, we could see the road, so we started skiing. I just remember skiing across this face, and all of a sudden, I just heard cracking.
Everything underneath me started moving.
I saw Bryce, and I heard him say, oh shit. I never even saw Ronnie. We stood there, and we watched them go. Nothing made any sense. Then it just instinct took over, and there were people who had skied down right before us who saw everything and pulled out their transceivers.
They're wearing beacons.
No beacons. No avalanche equipment.
I need shovels.
That was when I realized how stupid we were being.
Okay, does anybody have a probe? We're at the bottom of Solden 1. We need helicopter, 2 more patrollers, hasty team, then AED.
Probably took 15 minutes for helicopters to come in.
I was pretty aware that it had been too long. The first thing that appeared was Bryce's boots sticking up out of the snow. He was upside down. His boot was 6 feet from the surface. Came across Ronnie a few minutes later.
Ronnie, we got him. Did you get him out of the hole?
That was an image that I'll never forget.
The concept of riding up a lift, skiing on a trail, and we're in danger That did not exist in any of our heads.
The coaches and the boys did not receive any orientation or any training regarding the dangers of skiing in Europe versus skiing in North America.
None of the young men in that group knew the difference between on and off-piste. Off-piste in the United States is defined as out of bounds, going through the gate, going under the rope. That's not what the rules are in Europe. When you are off the groomer, you are off-piste.
In Solden, the day before the avalanche that killed Bryce and Ronnie, there had been heavy snowfall and strong winds. What that did is it put a lot of weight on top of the snowpack, which was fragile. Once these skiers got onto that slope, it couldn't support the additional weight. That weak layer fractured over a wide area, and that slab came crashing down. It produced debris that weighed almost 7 million pounds, the same as almost 10 747s.
It takes all of 20 minutes to learn and to be educated.
You want to make sure you're prepared. There are 5 points that are always really good to remember. You want to get the gear, get the training, get the forecast, get the picture, and get out of harm's way.
First, you need the gear. Going in the backcountry, you need a beacon, a probe, and a shovel. And unfortunately, that day in Solon, the boys did not have that.
I would have done anything for rescue gear, especially a shovel.
You can always increase your chances of being searchable if you're unlucky enough to be caught in an avalanche by having reco reflectors in your equipment and clothing.
Getting the gear is useless if you don't know how to use it. You've got to get the training. Take an avalanche class.
If we would have taken just one class, we would have known not to ski down that terrain in the first place.
One key thing you're going to learn in every avalanche class is that you have to check the forecast every time you ride.
None of us checked the forecast that morning. It would have taken just 2 minutes on the gondola ride, and none of this would have happened.
So when you're out on the snow, you gotta get the picture. And what does that mean? That means pay attention. Are you seeing recent avalanches? That's by far the most important clue. That's like Mother Nature screaming in your ear.
If we had known it wasn't controlled, we 100% would not have been there.
Finally, get out of harm's way. What that means is only one person is riding the slope at a time.
We were breaking one of the simplest rules. In some ways, it's a miracle that all 6 of us didn't die.
Once you get to the bottom, you need to get out of the way. That way, if somebody else in your group triggers an avalanche, you won't be caught.
These 5 simple steps everyone should know about, and everybody should be trained in. Coaches, parents, athletes, administrators of the program.
Everything that we did could have easily been prevented. I wish I could say that I couldn't have done anything to save their lives. That's just not true.
Anytime you have a major accident like this, it causes a ton of introspective thought. We realized that we really needed to look at it from the top down, bottom up. How can we make sure everybody's more educated to avert and reduce the chance of anything like this ever happening again?
That's why we at Brass are creating avalanche education specifically for coaches and athletes. We're also creating snow safety policies to be followed by ski racing groups.
Ski racing is definitely a dangerous sport, but what we're going down is a really highly regulated area. You have all the fencing, you have the snow prep, you have all these things that are out there to keep you safe. When you get out there in the backcountry, there's none of those luxuries.
For the people who assume that just because they know how to ski terrain or they know how to rip down a mountain because they ski downhill, it's a very different beast.
Don't let this happen to you and your family. Get educated, get out there, so we can keep skiing for Bryce and Ronnie, so their legacies live on.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I want to thank all of our sponsors, World Cup Supply, Sync, Know Before You Go, US Ski and Snowboard, BCA, Blizzard, Technica, and Nordica. Thank you very much for all you do to support brass programs. And one more final thought before we go. Again, if you can help to support brass with even a small donation, be that $10, $25, $50, $100, whatever you can afford today, anything you give us here today will help us to bring this education to many more people in the future. I'm Tom Kelly from Brass. Thank you very much for taking the time to think about snow safety tonight and join us for Brass 101.